to Beyond the Music, the podcast where we dive into the lives and stories of people who shaped the world of music. I am Karina.
And I'm Lena. We're both classically trained singers, and this podcast is our chance to explore the fascinating intersections of music, history, and humanity.
In our previous episode, we discussed the history of Bayreuth, and today we will be going to a darker place.
Uh-oh.
Specifically, we will be taking a trip to the Devil's Tritone.
Okay. No. I had to translate it in my brain. It's the Tritonus. Okay. No. The devil music.
Yes! I was inspired because summer is very hot. And I've heard a lot of people say to me, it's hot as hell.
Yeah, it really is hot as hell.
Yeah. And it got me thinking, let's just take a trip. Let's go there. Let's discuss this. So we're discussing the Devil's Tritone, myth, music, and misunderstanding.
Okay.
So the Devil's Tritone is the most infamous sounds in all of music history. A single interval that has been called forbidden, dangerous, unsettling, and even satanic. For centuries, musicians and listeners have referred to it as diabolus in musica. The Devil's Tritone is one of the most infamous sounds in all of music history, a single interval that has been called forbidden, dangerous, unsettling, and even satanic. For centuries, musicians and listeners have referred to it as diabolus in musica, the devil in music. It is better known today as the tritone. The tritone has inspired myths, frightened students of music theory, fascinated composers, and became a defining sound in everything from Gregorian chant to Wagner, jazz, horror films, and heavy metal. But was it really banned by the church? Why does it sound so strange to our ears? And how did a musical interval, once associated with the devil, become one of the most important building blocks in Western music? Today, we'll follow the tritone through nearly 1,000 years of musical history, listening to how composers transformed a supposedly forbidden sound into one of music's most powerful expressive tools. Before we can understand why people fear the tritone, we need to understand what it actually is. The word tritone literally means 3 tones. A tritone spans 3 whole steps. Examples include C to F sharp, or B to F. If you have access to a piano, try playing C and F sharp together. It sounds like this.
Nice.
Now compare that to C and G, like this. Tritone. The difference is immediately apparent. C and G sound stable, comfortable, resolved. C and F sharp sound tense, uneasy, as though they are pulling in opposite directions. This happens because the tritone divides the octave exactly in half. Imagine the octave as a circle. The tritone sits directly across from its starting note, creating a perfect balance of tension. Unlike a perfect fifth or octave, which clearly establish a tonal center, the tritone feels uncertain. I will play it again. Tritone. Perfect fifth. And octave. It seems to ask a question without providing an answer. Today we hear tritones everywhere. Film scores use them, jazz musicians depend on them, metal bands embrace them. But for centuries, they occupied a much more controversial position. To understand why, we must travel back nearly 1,000 years.
Wow.
Imagine Europe around the year 1000. Cathedrals dominate city skylines. Monasteries serve as centers of education. Music is primarily sacred. The dominant musical language is Gregorian chant. Music theory at this time was heavily influenced by ancient Greek philosophy. Certain intervals were considered consonant, stable, and pleasing. Others were dissonant, unstable, and requiring careful treatment. The tritone belonged firmly in the second category. One particular combination caused headaches for medieval singers: F and B natural. These notes create a tritone. In the medieval system of musical training developed by Guido of Arezzo, singers often altered B natural to B flat to avoid creating this interval. To medieval ears, the tritone sounded awkward and difficult to sing accurately. This is where we encounter the famous phrase, diabolus in musica, the devil in music. Now here's where history becomes interesting. Many people believe the church officially banned the tritone. It's a story repeated in documentaries, books, YouTube videos, and popular culture. But historians have found very little evidence for such a ban. No papal decree exists. No church council outlawed the interval. Instead, medieval theorists simply advised singers to avoid it because it sounded harsh and was difficult to perform. The phrase devil in music appears primarily in theoretical writings as a warning to students. Yet over time, legend transformed practical advice into a tale of musical prohibition, and the myth endured. Imagine a group of monks singing chant. A melody approaches, the note B natural, while another voice sustains an F. Suddenly, a tritone emerges. The sound stands out sharply against the smooth consonances surrounding it. The singers instinctively avoid it, not because they fear demons, because it sounds wrong within their musical language. The devil's reputation was born not from theology, but from acoustics, specifically the devil in music. So let's take a brief detour into science. Why does the tritone sound so unsettling? The answer lies partly in the physics of sound. Musical intervals are relationships between frequencies. Simple frequency ratios sound Simple frequency ratios sound stable. An octave has a ratio of 2 to 1. A perfect fifth has a ratio of 3 to 2. These intervals align closely with the natural harmonic series. The tritone, however, does not. Its frequency relationship is far more complex. As a result, our brains interpret it differently. Listeners often describe tritones as mysterious, suspenseful, anxious, dark, unresolved. Psychologists studying music perception have repeatedly found that dissonant intervals create emotional tension. The tritone is one of the strongest examples, and composers quickly discovered that tension could be incredibly useful. As Europe entered the Renaissance, composers became increasingly sophisticated. Rather than avoiding dissonance, they learned how to control it. The tritone became a tool. Composers such as Giovanni Palestrina occasionally used tritones as passing dissonances within larger musical lines. The key was preparation and resolution. A brief moment of tension followed by release. Think of it like storytelling. Conflict makes resolution satisfying. Without tension, music can feel static. The Renaissance transformed the tritone from a problem into a dramatic device. Listen to one of Palestrina's sacred motets. You may hear a fleeting dissonance appear and disappear almost immediately. That brief moment of instability heightens the beauty of the consonance that follows. The devil was beginning to earn his place in the choir. By the Baroque era, the tritone had actually become indispensable. No composer demonstrates this better than Johann Sebastian Bach. Consider the dominant seventh chord. At its heart lies a tritone. For example, in a G7 chord, the notes B and F form a tritone. That interval creates tension that naturally resolves to C major. Without the tritone, tonal harmony would function very differently. The interval, once treated with suspicion, became one of the primary engines driving Western music. Every time a Bach chorale reaches a cadence, chances are a tritone is helping guide the listener home. So, Johann Sebastian Bach composed mainly for the church. Yet, he included the devil's interval. The devil's interval is now doing God's work. The classical era continued this trend. Composers embraced the expressive possibilities of harmonic tension. One remarkable example appears in the overture to Don Giovanni by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. The story centers on a libertine nobleman whose crimes ultimately lead to supernatural judgment. Mozart uses dark harmonies filled with dissonance and tritone relationships to create an atmosphere of dread. Long before audiences see the drama unfold, they hear it. The tritone becomes a storytelling device, a musical omen. In the 19th century, composers sought greater emotional intensity. Few pushed harmony further than Richard Wagner. For example, the opening of Tristan und Isolde changed music history. The famous Tristan chord resists immediate resolution and creates overwhelming tension. Audiences in 1865 were stunned. The music seemed suspended between desire and fulfillment, between longing and satisfaction. Tritone relationships contribute significantly to this ambiguity. Many historians consider this work a turning point leading toward modern music. The devil's interval was no longer frightening, it was almost intoxicating. As the 20th century approached, composers began breaking traditional rules altogether. Claude Debussy used tritone relationships to create color and atmosphere. In Debussy's Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun, harmony floats without obvious direction. The tritone contributes to a dreamlike sound world. Then came Stravinsky. His ballet, The Rite of Spring, shocked audiences at its 1913 premiere. The music is filled with aggressive dissonances, including tritone relationships. The result is raw energy, primitive power, musical revolution. The devil had become modern. Jazz musicians embraced the tritone with enthusiasm. One of the most famous techniques in jazz harmony is the tritone substitution. Bebop pioneers like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie use this technique constantly. By substituting one dominant chord for another located a tritone away, musicians created richer harmonic colors and smoother voice leading. The interval that medieval theorists once warned students against had become a mark of sophistication, a sign of harmonic mastery. Film composers quickly learned the emotional power of the tritone. Audiences had already come to associate dissonance with suspense and danger. Composers used this knowledge brilliantly. The scores of Bernard Herrmann for films such as Psycho helped establish the musical language of horror cinema. Later composers continued the tradition. Whenever a movie needs to create uncertainty, dread, or supernatural tension, the tritone is never far away. The devil had found a new home in Hollywood. One of the most beautiful uses of the tritone appears not in horror music, but on Broadway. Lena, would you like to sing it?
Maria.
Gorgeous!
Thank you. I just took the inner tenor out of me, you know?
Stunning. The opening notes of Maria by Leonard Bernstein from West Side Story is a tritone, as Lena beautifully showed us. The melody leads upward by a tritone, using the word Maria. The interval immediately captures the extraordinary nature of the character's emotions. The sound feels larger than life, passionate, unforgettable. The same interval, once considered problematic, now expresses love. And now we arrive at perhaps the most famous chapter in the tritone's modern history: heavy metal. In 1970, Black Sabbath released a song called Black Sabbath. The opening guitar riff prominently features a tritone. The effect is immediate, dark, threatening, ominous. The band deliberately embraced the interval's legendary reputation. Metal musicians followed their lead. You'll hear tritones throughout the music of Metallica, Slayer, and Iron Maiden. Ironically, these musicians probably did more to popularize the phrase devil's interval than medieval church musicians ever did. The myth had come full circle. So let's separate fact from fiction. Was the tritone officially banned by the church? No. Evidence suggests a universal ban, mainly by music theorists. Did medieval theorists caution against it? Yes. Was it difficult to sing and considered dissonant? Absolutely. Is there anything inherently evil about the interval? No. The tritone is simply a sound. Its meaning depends entirely on context. In one piece, it creates terror. In another, longing. In another, excitement. In another, love. Throughout history, the tritone has evolved. The Devil's Tritone is really a story about human imagination, about how cultures assign meaning to sound, and about how music constantly reinvents itself. I hope you enjoyed the history of the tritone as much as we did. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
Next time, we'll delve into another fascinating chapter of music history. Until then, keep listening and discovering the stories beyond the music.
See you next time.